Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about Chronologic Paris 1920. And this copy was provided for review, but the thoughts in this video are all our own. And Chronologic Paris 1920 is designed by Fabien Gradel and Johan Levet.
Chronologic is a competitive mystery-solving game for 1 to 4 players. It takes place in the Parisian Opera, and you are racing to gather clues and solve the mystery the fastest. But before we get too into it, let's look at how it plays.
At the start of the game, you first choose one of the 3 different scenario boxes, and then one of the 5 investigations from that box. Then you lay out the character, time, and room cards and hand each player a sheet, a screen, and a pencil, and you're ready to solve the case. On their turn, the lead investigator will choose either a character or a time, and then place one location card under their chosen card, being careful not to reveal that card until it's in place. This will reveal 2 bits of information. The green box you share with all players, and the white box you keep to yourself. This info will all have to do with who was where and when. And then everyone makes notes of what they've learned, and the next player becomes the lead investigator. If anyone thinks they have the answer at any time, they announce that they think they've solved the case. If they're wrong, they're eliminated, and the rest of the players continue trying to complete the puzzle. If they're right, they win and are hailed as the world's greatest investigator.
Chronologic is designed by the same people who did Turing Machine. So if you're not familiar with Turing Machine, it's a fairly complicated puzzle-solving game where you're trying to use as few clues as possible to try and figure out a code. And this one is about solving a mystery using people who are moving around. So I think it's a lot more thematic, but you can see how it's done by the same designers.
Yeah, you can definitely see a little bit of shared DNA there. Like you said, Turing Machine is quite a bit heavier, it's quite a bit more complicated, and this is a little bit more accessible. And I love Turing Machine. I adore that game. I play it all the time on BGA. I know you're not as big of a fan of Turing Machine, but I found that Chronologic is something that I think we can kind of meet in the middle on.
Yeah, I like the thematic elements. I like the mystery solving, and it does remind me of Clue. A lot of people grew up playing Clue, and I think it's going to be an obvious comparison. It is different, though. There aren't weapons, and in Chronologic, you're really trying to trace the movement of the people who are constantly having to shift rooms and figure out who's where when.
And that is kind of the name of the game here, is you are tracking all of these different suspects, and they always have to move every hour, and they always have to be somewhere on the map. And so you're just trying to figure out where they are and where they're going. And I like that there are 3 different boxes in this, and each one has kind of a different mystery. So they're taking that like core puzzle, which is a pretty simple puzzle, where you're just saying, you know, who was, or how many people were in this room at this hour, or how many times has this person been in this room? And all 3 of the boxes use that same basic system, but they all play a little bit different.
Yeah, so the starting box is trying to figure out who poisons the detective. So you're trying to figure out who is alone with the detective, which I think is the simplest premise. Another one is about figuring out who has stolen like the jewels. So you're trying to trace the jewels from like one place to see who is alone with them, but it might get passed off to other people.
And then there's another one that is the Phantom of the Opera. And so that is all about figuring out who is never with anybody else, who's kind of sneaking around in the shadows. And so it's kind of subtle differences between the 3, but they do feel pretty different.
Yeah, and there are different difficulties for each of the boxes as well. So within each of those mysteries, there are 5 different difficulties. And I think the biggest change is what information you get at the beginning, because for the harder ones, you only know about like half of the suspects, and not knowing where the other half are definitely means you need to figure out more clues before you have any idea of what's happening.
It really does feel different at those different player counts, because at 2 players, you're getting that secret little bit of information every second turn. So there's always that one bit of information everyone gets, that one bit of information that only the current
detective or whatever it's called gets. And it feels like it maybe moves a little bit too quick at 2 players.
Yeah, I do like at more players you're getting fewer clues. It makes the game last longer, and it is trickier to piece it together and to really decide whether to get new information or to go back and revisit so you have the same information as a clue that somebody already looked at.
Yeah, that definitely is a tricky thing because you think like, oh, that person definitely got like the exact bit of information that I think we all need, but I feel like it's cheesy to go and just ask the exact same question that they just asked, so I want to try and find it out another way.
Yeah, I feel like you're much more into figuring out what questions people are asking and why, whereas I'm just really looking at the information I have and what I want. I'm doing less of the meta game, but I think this works for either type of player. It comes with 15 cases, and I would say at 2 players, each case takes us maybe like 15 minutes, whereas at 4, it takes about double that. It felt more of an experience at 4 players.
Yeah, it does, and it feels more like stressful about when am I gonna actually try and solve the clue as well. At 2 players, we actually invented a rule because it feels a little bit anticlimactic when somebody solves the puzzle and then it's just like, oh, I guess I won if they're wrong. So we've got, if they solve the puzzle, you've got as many turns as there are stars for that puzzle. So if it's like a 5 difficulty puzzle and someone else gets it wrong, you've got 5 more turns to get it right, or else you also lose.
Yeah, because it is a race to solve it first, so you are motivated to guess even if you're not 100% sure. But absolutely, at 2 players, it was just kind of like, well, I guess I win.
There is also a solo mode in this, and that is just a kind of how quickly can you solve the puzzle. And there are a few different little rules in there, but it doesn't change it very much at all. It's just kind of a bit of a kind of speed solving thing.
So in terms of components, I think everything looks really good. I do like the overall system of using the card and then like the thing that goes on top of it with the windows. When we first saw that, we thought we might accidentally get like secret information, but it's actually really intuitive. Even when we played with new people, everyone automatically like just did it like upside down, didn't see anything else, and then those windows gave you exactly what information you need. And pretty clearly too, of like, okay, this is what you're telling people and this is for you alone.
Yeah, I didn't have any problem with that at all. And I definitely did think, oh, I'm gonna accidentally look at this for sure. And it has not happened once in, I don't know what we've played, like 10 of the 15 cases now. And it hasn't happened yet. So I don't think it's gonna happen. I also really like the little boxes that each of the cases come in. So they've got these little kind of foldy tuck boxes that have the specific cards that you need for that case and then the little booklet for each case. And I think those work really well and they look really nice.
Yeah, and there are plenty of sheets too. There's probably like about double-ish what you would need, which is nice, meaning you can like play through it again. I think one of the trickies though is on the sheets and on the map is just the symbol for the different locations. And maybe it's just us, but we didn't really find them intuitive. Anytime someone said like the Grand Gallery, we're like, okay, which one's the Grand Gallery? I do wish the Grand Gallery and the words for the locations were written on either like the big map or on the sheets.
Yeah, that would probably be helpful because I think half of them, like we're good with dancing, music, and stage. I don't even know what the other 3 are called, and the symbols don't really connect to them in my mind. So yeah, every single time somebody says one of those 3, the Grand Foyer, we're like, which symbol is that? Oh, okay, it's the kind of housey thing. So that could possibly be something that trips other folks up, or maybe you just think, housey thing is kind of like foyer, and then you won't have a problem with it.
And it is written on the card as well, so like you definitely can figure out which one it is.
And otherwise, I think like the artwork is pretty solid for the different characters. There's also a really nice screen that you put in front. It maybe isn't quite tall enough. I feel like I can see over, but maybe that's just because I'm too tall. But that does give you a little bit of an overview of everything. So just to remind you what you can do. There are not a lot of rules here to remember, but it does remind you. The other thing that just a tiny nitpick is I hate the little golf pencils. I just always want pencils to have erasers on them, but it doesn't matter. You've got pencils in your house, they've got erasers on them. If you don't like the golf pencils, you don't need to use them.
The between the cases, because there's the 3 different types, each of those do all feel different, and even within the different difficulties, it actually does feel surprisingly different case to case, and the length of time will just totally vary. It will depend on how many players you're playing with, the complexity of the case, and like just your general gaming group.
And at first, I definitely thought that you could only play through each one of these once, and then you would kind of know forever what the solution was for each one of these different crimes. But I'm really not so sure about that, because each of these boxes has 5 different solutions. And I don't know, maybe there's somebody there who's going to memorize each one of those solutions, and once they've done it, they're just going to know that forever. But if I were to play this again, like 2 months later, there's no way I would remember which one of those cases was which one of those cases and who was moving where, or that I would ask the same questions or any of that stuff. So I do think it probably has a bit more replayability than one might imagine, but it is going to depend on who you are. I played a lot of hockey. My short-term memory is not terrific. Some other folks might be able to remember a little bit better.
Yeah, and you're right, probably time does help. So you wouldn't like solve it and then 2 hours later go to play the same case again.
I would.
Although maybe you could, but other people would probably need like a couple months before trying again, and then they wouldn't know. But I kind of think of it a little bit like those escape room boxes where you can play through it once, but then you're not like destroying any parts. Although I do think this is more replayable again, given some time, than those. I think this game is for people who like puzzle solving games. So if you liked Turing Machine, I do think you would still like this. But even if you didn't like Turing Machine, I think this may open it up to a bigger audience.
Yeah, this is, as we said, this is definitely a lot lighter than Turing Machine, but it does have that little like puzzle solving fix in there, even though it is a little bit of a simpler system. Also, if you grew up loving Clue, this might be a fit because it does kind of scratch that same itch. Like, I would still play Clue today. I played Simpsons Clue so many times. The Clue 2, the Master Clue, that was one of my all-time favorite games of my childhood. And that's probably one of the things that kind of made me connect with this one as well.
Yeah, I think this would also appeal to people who like escape room puzzles, because it is very much trying to figure out a puzzle. But it is competitive. It is a race to try and figure it out first. So if you don't like working in a team, this gives you the option to be the fastest and the best solver.
But on the other side of that, I do think for some folks it's going to be a little bit stressful, because you may feel like, oh, if I just had 2 or 3 more turns, I would have got to solve that puzzle. And like, I really feel like I want to solve that puzzle. So it can be a little bit frustrating when somebody is always solving that puzzle first, and you're just like, oh, 1 more turn and I would have got that. But it is also like, it's a kind of a good kind of stress, but for some folks, that may be a little bit of a point of frustration.
The other caveat is that it plays quite quickly at 2 players. So if you want the most out of the game, then I would say it works better for 3 or 4 players. But I was really interested in it, and I'm interested to see what they do for the 2 follow-up ones that take place in like 1450 and 2500.
Especially that 2500 one. I really want to see some future stuff. And you know what? This is going to surprise anyone who watches this channel, but I would love to see one with dinosaurs. And that is it. Have you played Chronologic? What did you think about it? What are some other cool puzzle games that you might suggest?
Thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments what games you would suggest. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.